Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm going to be honest. I don't know why I'm answering this question, but the person who wrote it, I think, wrote it in a genuine, really kind of curious kind of way. So I'm going to tackle it. But this is, you have these videos where you're wandering into trouble. You know that there's no possible way that people are going to be like, oh yeah, okay, we'll listen to this one with nuance and detail. Sure. Um, so the question is. Perch. I saw this thread with Eric Larson, and he's talking. I think this person is talking about the piracy thread, where Eric Larson kind of wandered into a discussion on piracy, and then said piracy is wrong, and then somehow, and I don't say it like somehow like magic, but in some weird way, the conversation started to hop to socialism. And I think the basic premise is like if you're counting the steps, it went from Larson saying piracy is wrong, and then people responding saying people are pirating your stuff because it's garbage, and then somehow it went from there to socialism. Like I think it was the creators ran fans off because of socialist politics in the books, and so Larson found himself then arguing about socialism, and so Larson says. None of the creators are socialists, or like that is not what's happening, or it's something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. If I'm clever, I'll put up the tweets, but honestly, that's just some backdrop. If you heard none of this was what was going on, kind of this battle back and forth. So the writer says, are comic creators socialist? Is the majority of comic creators, are they communists or socialists in their ideology? Is that true? Because I hear that, but it doesn't terribly make sense, because a lot of comic creators also are looking for pay raises and hoping for Hollywood deals and making money and do commissions and other things. So I don't understand, how can comic creators be socialists and communists and still want to make money? And okay, there's a lot of questions in there. And I think a lot of it, by the way, can be summed up in this way, which is I don't think a lot of people, including the people who call themselves communists and socialists, I don't think that a lot of people really understand what that ideology is. It's become kind of a catch all term for a bunch of things. I mean, when somebody says, I'm for socialism, and they post that on Twitter, I don't think a lot of those people have actually like read books and studied history and kind of know what it is they're saying. It's kind of like saying I'm into, what if it was 4 years ago saying I'm into Imagine Dragons? It's like, sure you are. So, wait, now, let me see if I can just offend people in every particular genre of everything. But it's. I don't think that a lot of people have studied all this stuff. Well, I'll use a better example. It goes a little bit older. I live here in the Pacific Northwest. Magically, right around the time Kurt Cobain died, he killed himself. A lot of people in the area magically became Nirvana fans. They were huge Nirvana fans. Most of them, or not, I don't know about most of them, but many of them had never actually listened to Nirvana beyond maybe Smells Like Teen Spirit and Lithium, and that was about it. And so they didn't really have a good sense of who these people are. I remember there's a classic interview on 107.7 The End where they're like talking to, quote unquote fans of Nirvana. And somebody's like, oh man, it was a great 5-person band. It's like, no, no, it was not. So it's just, I think that a lot of the people who are on Twitter self-identifying as socialists really don't have a good concept of what it is. And for fairness, I think a lot of the people who insult others is saying, you're pushing socialist topics or you're pushing a socialist agenda in comics. I don't think a lot of them realize what it is either. I think it's kind of this, it's a catch-all term to mean, I don't know, progressive values plus some kind of sprinkling of diversity plus, Trump bad. I mean, in many ways, I think a lot of the people who either insult people over being socialists or identify as socialists are actually, we don't like Trump/Republicans. And so therefore socialist is kind of, but there's a lot of variation to what those things are. Those terms, socialism as an ideology, actually does have a meaning. It has a mandate, it has a mission statement, it has a lot of things. and most people are not paying attention to what that is. So no, I will say I this is going to shock people. I agree with Eric Larson. I don't think that a lot of comic creators are quote unquote socialists. I think some are, but I don't think a lot of them are. However, I do think a lot of them are saying things, particularly on social media, for the ones that are there. And keep in mind, by the way, that the creators who are active, loud, shouting around on social media still represent a minority, meaning a lesser amount than the creators not on social media or who do not tweet regularly or pay no attention. We'll get more to that point in a moment, but you should remember that the majority of comic creators are not screwing around on Twitter. Honestly, you might like that can't be. You see these tweets all the time. No, actually, it is true. There's some loud voices, certainly some bigger names, but if you take the entire group of people who are working in comics and you do a pie chart, most of them are not on social media uh, because they want to get work done. Presumably, I don't know. Okay, but regardless, I think that there's a lot of people who say things, will identify things, will certainly be anti-Republican or anti-Trump. But I do think that stands on its own for what you believe. I don't think that is quote unquote always socialism. I think that they're again, this is just me, and your mileage may vary, but I do think these terms, these ideologies, these groups, they have meaning. And I think I hate it when people's like they throw these terms around and they really don't know what they mean or they don't know what they're identifying with. Definitely a lot of the indie creators, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong terms again. A lot of the indie creators on social media, so in other words, not a lot of the indie creators, but a lot of them that are on social media, particularly lower level, will say things like, communism bad, capitalism bad, communism good, I'm a socialist, self-professed socialist. They'll put that in the header of their Twitter account and everything else. And but at the same time, will say plenty of things that contradict that ideology. And the reality is, I mean, the person who's putting that into their feed or putting it up on their little header image, they're looking for clout. I mean, let's just call it what it is. They're looking for the brownie points of being cool. Like, it's no different than in the 70s and 80s. You had like people who were, beatnik communists, and that's what they were going with because it was a good costume to wear, and that's what a lot of this is. Comic creators, certainly plenty of them, complain about getting screwed out of royalties, getting low pay rate, but that leads to another thing. Saying you're a socialist or a communist doesn't mean you don't want to get paid. You still do want money. It's just, and this goes back to the understanding of the ideology. Unfortunately, I think in the U.S. And what's weird is this is more of a U.S., somewhat Great Britain, UK problem, is that people have equated, hey, CEOs that are making like 8 million a year, while the working class in the company is laid off or paid very little. That's unfair. And the funny thing is, if you went back to, the 80s, the 90s, if you talk to conservatives, if you talk to Republicans, a lot of them would say the same thing. They would say, certainly it's the company's right to pay people how they want, but that is a screwed up company if the CEO is giving themselves a giant raise and a huge bonus and millions of dollars while simultaneously laying off their workers and paying them garbage. Most people, regardless if you're Republican, Democrat, capitalist, socialist, whatever, agree that's pretty dodgy. The difference is kind of in the, now what do you want to do about it? So some groups will say, I hate that, but it is that company's right to do it if they want. And some people will say, a government or some kind of controlling agency needs to come in and stop that and needs to basically force the CEO to take a pay cut or not lay people off, etc. That's where it gets detailed. I'm not going to try and explain all of what socialism is in the context of this video, but I guess to answer the original question, my own personal belief is that many of the people in comics who say they are socialists or communists or whatever it happens to be are doing so for clout. They're doing so because they think it makes them look cool. It's kind of like comic creators who say, I'm super punk rock. It's like, what does that mean? What does that actually entail? That's where I think a lot of it's coming from. Many of the people who say these things, I know some people up here in the Pacific Northwest who will talk about being socialist and everything else, and they happily live in a nice suburban house with their spouse, who's the breadwinner of the family or the relationship. And they, I know a self-professed socialist who talks about evil capitalism, drives around in their Lexus, and you know, I mean, it's an outfit, I guess is the best way to put it. I think that what a lot of people complain about in terms of a socialist agenda within comics is actually not a socialist agenda per se. It's an anti-Republican or an anti-right wing agenda. I think it's more that than socialist. But I guess it's cooler, and I mean, cable news and everything's talking about socialism all the time, so we do too. But that's more what's going on. I think that a lot of comic creators absolutely want pay raises. They want, they want bonuses. They want a higher page rate. They want to own more. I mean, the funny thing is, a lot of comic creators will talk about wanting to own their own work. They'll want to, create comics and own the character and get all the benefit of selling it off to Hollywood one day and getting that TV money. Well, I mean, if you're strictly talking about a socialist ideology, that wouldn't be possible. Like that's not how it would work. You could make something; it could be owned by the collective, it could be owned by groups, it wouldn't be owned by you anymore. A lot of what when I've talked to people and certainly seen some of the arguments going on social media from people who are saying I'm a socialist and I work in comics. They want a lot of the things that are classic capitalist things. They want to own those characters. They want to be able to profit off of it. They want to be able to take that money for themselves, and that's what they want to do. So it's kind of this other thing, is I guess what I'm saying. But I don't know. I mean, people throw names around all the time. I don't know if they really put a lot of thought into what it is that they're calling each other. They just scream, and that's what people do. It's a cool thing to do. All the kids are doing it, and go nuts. I guess it is what it is. As a reader, as a customer, and I guess I conclude with this. At the end of the day, I think certainly your mileage may vary. Do what you want to do. You should read the comics that are entertaining to you. I know for myself, if I was reading a comic that was hardcore, constantly talking about anti right wing or left wing, any kind of thing where the comic was constantly spouting an ideology at me, I would be annoyed. That's not a fun comic for me to read. If you're going to do that, you need to do it in a clever way. I thought that in Erratic, they tackled some of that in the school in a very clever way. It was fun to read. It was different. It was something new. I mean, and that's it. Like, as a customer, bring me something new. The comic book hot take that Donald Trump was a bad president it's not a hot take. It's not. I mean, we have heard that enough, plenty. Like I'm good. Like I don't need to hear it anymore. It's less about Trump and more about the fact that you've gone at it now 50 times. I'm good. I don't need another allegory for some kind of weak, lame villain in a comic book that has no real depth or character, and other than they're a white business guy that looks vaguely like Trump and is saying make my company great again. Like as a writer, I don't think you're being clever if you're going to that well for the 50th time. It's just it's tiring. It's tiring for me to read it. You can turn anything, including things I agree with, you can turn me against them if you just regurgitate them nonstop, constantly. I'm like, I'm done. I've seen enough. I crave new things. I crave original things. And one of the things I always liked about comics was that, in the past at least, a lot of the writers were really like, that was the pull, to do something new and original and bold and daring. And there were great comics that definitely leaned left and leaned right, and also just did new amazing things. But that's the key. They were new. So to me, the whole who's socialist, is this an agenda, all that kind of stuff. The biggest annoyance for me, and I'm just talking for me, it may be different, is that I've seen it now a lot. Like unless you're going to bring something new, I don't care. I'm more offended by the fact that you're giving me something that I've seen a dozen times this year than if you're insulting this person or that person. I've said on this channel before, I've disliked all of the candidates, the ones that win and the ones that have lost for U.S. office for quite some time. I would really like the country to put better people up. I haven't felt inspired by anyone for quite a while. That's just me. So if you're going to insult somebody or praise somebody, I just be new, be original. Give me a story that I haven't seen before. Don't give me something that feels like I've read it 18 times in different flavors. That's what I crave. Anyway, there you go. There's the answer to your question. Again, I think a lot of people, particularly the people who are identifying, and then in terms of fans and customers that use this term to be insulting, I think the key is they're trying to insult somebody, less trying to identify exactly what they are from an ideological standpoint. And I think the people who are using this as a proud socialist, I don't think in fact, almost worse, I don't think they know what it is they're identifying with. I think it's just for clout. My opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.